Shalom Aleichem. This week's Parasha is Vayachel, and our reading is from Exodus 35, verse 1 to 38, verse 20. Vayachel, the name of the Parasha, is and he assembled. So we start at Exodus 35, verse 1. In our reading this week, we find the Sabbath command that we will focus on, repeated from the Ten Commandments and the covenant passage with Israel in Exodus 31, verse 12. Why does God see the Sabbath as so important and command Israel to keep it? So let's start reading our passage. We are at Exodus 35, verse 1. And Moshe assembled all the congregation of the children of Israel and said to them, These are the words which Yahweh has commanded you to do. So we see that there's a commandment coming, and the commandment entails the keeping of Shabbat. So Elohim, it's very important, the commandment requires a scheduled 6 days of work and a 7th day of rest. We find that a death penalty is connected to the Sabbath command to show its importance. So that's what we find in verse 2, 35 verse 2. Work is done for 6 days. Yeah, so it's part of the Sabbath command that we should work for 6 days. But on the 7th day, it shall be set apart to you, a Sabbath of rest to Yahweh. Anyone doing work on it is put to death. Wow, very important. The Creator himself, with creation, initiated a 7th-day cycle that he wants Adam to imitate and follow. Please take note that the creation week starts on a Sunday as the first day of the week. So meaning Shabbat is on Saturday. We find this in Genesis 2 verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their array. And verse 2, and in the 7th day Elohim completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the 7th day, and set it apart, because on it he rested from all his work which Elohim has in creating had made. So we find with creation, on each day of the 7 creation days, that something was made, created by the Creator, God. But what is created on the 7th day? This is the question that we should ask. And what we find in verse 3 is, and Elohim blessed the 7th day and set it apart. So it's a holy day, it's a set apart day, it's a blessed day. For what? That's what we are to study with Shabbat when we study the topic of Shabbat. Let us look closer to the command to not do work on the Shabbat. So what does work entail? So anyone, and we find in Exodus 35 verse 2, it says, anyone doing work on the Shabbat is put to death. Okay, so that shows the importance of keeping Shabbat. They are very, it's a great penalty that one brings on himself in not keeping the Shabbat. So what does work entail? So in Hebrew, in the Hebrew language, there are 2 words for work. The one is avodah, we find it in Genesis, whereas Adam worked in the Garden of Eden. That's avodah. But the word we find in this passage in connection with Shabbat is melecha. So what does melecha entail? While melecha is a very precise halachic meaning, namely, so the meaning of the word melecha in this passage is occupational work, business, workmanship. In other words, your profession. What do you do to earn a living? That is what you are not allowed to do on a Shabbat. That does not mean if you are a teacher, you're not allowed to teach on Shabbat. Or if you are a rabbi, or you are a spiritual leader, that you're not allowed to practice your occupation on a Shabbat, because there's exceptions, like with a priest. A priest is allowed to do his occupation on a Shabbat because he has to do service, because believers come to the temple and they want to worship. So there is exceptions. But your normal person, your secular person, is not allowed to do any professional work or occupational work on a Shabbat. So in Jewish thought, basic work, like occupational work or any work, entails the basic identity of work is carrying. So carrying something is the first basic principle of work. So let's have a look at what carrying entails. The category involves carrying, this category involves carrying in a public place. In other words, it's not carrying something. So what is not allowed is not something carried within your living space. Like, for instance, I would pick up a chair from here to there. That's allowed on a Shabbat. But anything carried outside of your house, outside of your domain, that would qualify as work. This is one of the few categories of work that is actually mentioned in the Torah. It is also the very first type of work that was not allowed, prohibited. As we discussed earlier, the initial commandment of the Shabbat was given in connection with manna. You remember? When the manna, they had to collect manna, and they were not allowed to collect it on a Shabbat. But what possible type of work was involved in gathering a portion of manna for one's family? Obviously, carrying. So you had to collect, you had to carry it back. Thus, when Moshe told the people in Exodus 16 verse 29, "Let no man leave his place on the seventh day," he was telling them that they could not carry the manna on the Shabbat. The Torah also gives an account of a man who was put to death for gathering wood on the Shabbat. Here again, according to some commentators, his violation of Shabbat involved carrying, so he had to collect the wood and carry it back. In the third place, we find the prophet Jeremiah specifically warning his people not to carry on the Shabbat. We find it in Jeremiah 17 verse 21 and 22. He says, "Take heed and carry no burdens on the Shabbat. Also, do not carry any burden out of your house on the Shabbat." So we find a clear instruction not to carry anything on the Shabbat because it entails work. Carrying is really the prototype of all other types of Shabbat work. As mentioned earlier, the definition of such work is any act where man demonstrates his mastery over nature. So to master nature, the basics would be to change it. But the first act by which man demonstrates such mastery is by taking things from nature and carrying them where he needs them. This was the deed of the man gathering wood. Therefore, if we are to relinquish our mastery over nature, the first requirement is that we not carry anything away. So on the Shabbat, we're not allowed to carry or change or create. In a sense, by not carrying, we also relinquish our ownership of everything in the world. This is quite interesting on the Shabbat. The Shabbat is like the Shemitah, the Sabbath year, and also the Yuvel, the year of release, the 50th year, where everything becomes ownerless. So on the Shabbat also, the Shabbat is ownerless in that We relinquish our ownership of everything in the world. A main sign of ownership is that one may take something wherever he pleases. On the Shabbat, we give up something of this ownership. Nothing may be removed from the house. When a man leaves his house, he may carry nothing but the clothes on his back. It is Elohim's will, not man. It is Elohim, not man, who owns all things. So on Shabbat, everything is owned by Elohim. We belong to him. Carrying in a private home is permitted on a Shabbat. As I've said, it is only in a public domain that it is forbidden. So now let's just have a look at an example of something that happened in connection with Yeshua that we have a question about. Let's look at a strange incident that happened in the Gospel of John. Yeshua, Jesus, heals a paraplegic on Shabbat and orders him to carry his bed. Wow. Let's have a look at the passage. It's John 5 verse 1. I start reading for us, John 5 verse 1. After this, there was a festival of the Yuadim, and Yeshua went up to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, at the sheep gate, there is a pool, which is called in Hebrew Beit Zeda, having 5 porches. In these were lying a great number of those who were sick, blind, crippled, paralyzed, waiting for the stirring of the water. And a certain man was there who had a sickness 38 years. Wow. When Yeshua saw him lying there, and knowing that he already had been a long time, he said to him, "Do you wish to become well?" So now let's just stop for a minute. There were lots of sick people there that day. Why would Yeshua choose this person to heal? And only heal that one person? Could Yeshua qualify faith with him and knew that he had the means to be healed? So all others were waiting and they did not have sufficient faith to be healed. Yeshua qualified this person. So Yeshua went to him and he said to him, "Rise, take up your bed." I'm at verse 8. John 5 verse 8. And Yeshua said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man became well, and he took up his bed and he was walking. Now it was Shabbat on that day. And the Yuadim, the Jews, therefore said to him who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, it is not right for you to take up the bed." He answered them, "He who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk." Therefore they asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk?" That's quite strange. Why would Yeshua put this person that he healed in a position of conflict with the religious leaders of the day? Strange that the religious leaders' focus was on the person breaking the Shabbat and not the wonderful healing of the sick. Why is that? Did they put the Shabbat command above the well-being of the believer? It seems that was the case. Verse 13. But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Yeshua had moved away, a crowd being in that place. Afterwards Yeshua found him in a set-apart place and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Sin no more, so that no worse matter befalls you." The man went away and told the Yuadim that it was Yeshua who made him well. And because of this, Yuadim persecuted Yeshua and were seeking to kill him because he was doing these healings on the Shabbat. But Yeshua answered them, "My Father works until now, and I work." So this was Yeshua's answer. He qualified himself in doing good works and doing the work of his Father, healing, releasing, saving. And this is what we are allowed to do on the Shabbat. Why would Yeshua create such conflict on Shabbat? with the religious leaders of the day. Was his goal to show them the true meaning of Shabbat? Something to ponder on. Hope we will you will join me again next week in our next reading of the Parasha. And have a good week. Shabbat Tov.